one take because I really don't like doing these. I'm going to do a video as requested on more of the generality. And the reason I want to explain this is not an area I like to do much. And the reason I don't like to do general is that everybody's at a different point of their training, they're at different ages, and their body requirements are different. That's something I personally like to look at, or if I'm working directly with someone, or if I'm talking directly with a coach type thing, to where I'm looking at those areas. To me, generality is exactly that. We're getting a general basis, and there is a need for general, but individual. And when you start getting to that top point, and we're starting to look at some very top end scenarios where we're starting to hit areas that are past normalities and getting into the very advanced stages, it becomes very different to use these things. But I want to touch on them, and I want to get people started on some of the people with questions. And I've also realized that there's a kind of a miss of knowledge out there, and that's on me just as much as anyone. So I brought in some of the tools that we have all over the place and kind of start general. So as you've seen, or if you've watched video 1, we gave a general idea of the systems of the body and how they function. We go into the video 2. We're starting to narrow it down more into the cortical remodeling or bone remodeling, in which you're using the cortical bone itself, and you're starting to microfracture or crack it to allow it to heal and start to create densities within the bone. We can then subdivide these into different areas. It can go exponential because, again, the human body can adapt beyond what we want to, but we were going to put it into categories because that seems to where most people's minds understand. So let's say we're going to actually look at an impact type style and then a weight bearing type scenario. So we know that there's fracturing in both categories and then a reaction in both categories, but they're not the same. The bone reacts and puts itself into a safe position and growth position to react to what we put as the stressor. So picking this bag up against gravity, we're looking at a compression scenario. Pushing force or force into this is a different scenario. Now, Max said it best, force is force, and that's absolutely true. And it depends on what we do with that force. So if we look at force from the head down is one way. If I lay down, obviously the force of gravity is pushing against myself in a more of a plane type position. So we got to look at those things and think about those things as we're advancing. So we have video 1, generality, video 2, looking at more of a specificity type scenario. Now this one we're going to look at how do we just even get there. So I'm going to start off on the super basics because I want to make sure that children are involved. If you're a parent, if you're looking at just trying to get somebody into physical activity, we have to look at different things. And I'm going to explain bone actual remodeling itself, or cortical remodeling itself, is different. And I want that expressed clearly, that bone cortical is a training type in itself. So it is a system training, completely individual. There is that system going on during normal training also, but we can advance it very far like anything else. It depends on how far you want to actually focus in on it. So if we look at a child and we look at some of the basic things, and we give them the big 80-ounce gloves there, and they got pillows strapped onto them, and they're wrapped around with a mattress, and we send them out there and they're looking like this and they're trying to hit the bag, and we're working an energy system. We're just trying to get physical activity to happen in the body to start to work in unison together to start to function. We start working on motor skills. We call it technique. We start getting the techniques in better. We start to understand even what striking is. It's general, and it's in a safe way to where we're trying to make it to where we can at least start the activity of the child to start to develop the general preparedness of the individual, and that's excellent. So that's one thing. I want that understood, that this is never to deter away from the entry level stuff all the way up, but the stuff that I'm working on that we're talking about is very advanced. So when we look at building up to those tolerances, we can start off with, first we have to kind of self-observe ourselves and assess ourselves. So if we walk in and our knuckles are very soft and dainty, and we've never really hit anything that's on a leather product or even a little more advanced type product, you're going to bleed, or you're going to tear the skin apart. The skin itself is probably the starting weak point of the systems that we're working at as part of the human anatomy. So this system is probably the problem. If it's the musculature and we're just not used to the work itself, then we're looking at, another energy system, another training function, to where we have to build up an ability to even function and train. These are different things to look at. Normally we work in unison and we call it the sport or specificity, which is an excellent way to train. What I'm looking at is once you're in that specificity, how do we advance those exact things, that 1 or 2% we can't quite get out of ourselves to get that edge. How are we missing that top 5%, let's say, in the energy systems, and each part of the individual anatomy broke down into specific systems that we can get that edge. So that's where this is going to go to. So we start off real basic. So let's look at it super basic. We could take a child and put them up against a super soft pillow and have them work, and they're going to start to understand striking. And as they build up that tolerance and the hands can handle it, and the energy systems can handle it, we can move them up to a medium-sized pillow. We could even move up into an advanced pillow. And if you think when we were kids back in my day, that was normal. Like, you know, you punch against old pillows or what do you call pads off of your couch or different things like that, and you would work on them and do those things. And it was normal, and we've kind of lost those tolerances. So we could build it up then, and we start getting into, let's go right into, say, a punching bag, to where you're starting off a younger person, where you can get a cheaper bag, a thinner bag, to where you're looking at a very soft product, but where they're not built up with heavy internals. And then we can start to work on that, to where we can start to see how the knuckles act. We could add thicker gloves, so we could put big 20-ounce gloves on there to start, and then break the gloves down, diminishing the ounce levels, so they're getting higher impacts from vibration between the soft and the soft, and then break it down slowly. As we get into a little bit more advanced, we can actually start bare knuckling to start building up the skin tolerances to make sure that our strike is available to maintain on a skin, bone, and musculature levels as we advance those areas. And we can look at that very easily. And you can take references on that. Hey, I can hit it so many times and I start to notice the knuckle hurts. I can go so many times and so many reps, and then it starts to become a problem. And that's where individuals should be writing that kind of stuff down and taking notes. From there, we can go up to heavier bags. We can go up to thicker scenarios. We can get into denser sand fields, where we're getting some real dense bags that are heavy duties, so we can really start to work on that impact and up to that point. Now keep in mind, the scientific standard is we will build up an ability against any stressor. So if we only hit soft pillows, let's say we're only working striking mats all the time, or striking pads, our ability only works up to the ability to strike this level of pad. The problems arise that we're starting to see, as we saw in video 1 with that tibia bone that shattered, was that we created force ability with the musculatures and so on and so forth. We have used the striking ability of most people to then be working on, say, soft bags or padded bags. A lot of the sparring partners are running, full protective gear that's heavily padded, and those are all excellent things until we run into the weak point, and of course the weak things break. We ran into a point that all that extra work and all that soft work and all that tissue work ran into a shin bone or a block that hit an area that we did not build up enough strength in the bone densities to maintain, and it broke. So as we start to get into a little bit more advanced stuff, so again, you can start super simple, get into mediums, go up into highs. This is the basic stuff you're seeing online. You're working on it in systems that work for you. I won't get into the programming itself right now, because I think each individual needs their own programming types and for what their type of sparring style or need of it is, so they can figure it out. And we work that up to where we start to take notes. Hey, I noticed I was super soft in the knuckles. They were kind of girly. I turned around later on. As I build them up, I noticed they thickened up. I can hit the bag longer and harder. Then we can increase force. So I start off with 20 or 30% hit, then I increase a little bit more power, then I'm increasing a little more power, and so on and so forth, where you start to notice you can do that for reps normally in a normal system that we build up like anything else. When we start to get a little more specialized and start to look at each area, going, okay, I realize that my hands are the weak area, and I've got to start, let's just use hands to make it easy. And need to start to build up just the hand striking themselves. We can start to look at the different products that we do have. So we can start to do the same thing on the heavier pads that are a little thicker, that are a little more dense. When you're working on different angles, so you can work on different knuckles, and you can actually break it down as far as you need to and start to go, well, I realize that my normal striking knuckles are doing excellent, but I realize my outside goofy knuckles are starting to not be able to take that much. We can start to just work those and start to specialize in that area to bring the weak points up to strengths and then make ourselves more of a complete athlete. As you're seeing, I've got 140-pound hammer dummy down here that we work for, jiu-jitsu and different fighting styles and that kind of stuff. Again, when you're striking on it, you can work on the same thing to where you can we use foam. I have a big thick foam in there that I put underneath of it, so when you're hitting on top of it, you can actually soften the blow into the dummy at first, change it to a softer foam, and then to the dummy himself, and then reverse it where you're putting the foam under the dummy to where it's absorbing a little bit more than the harder floor, and then down to the harder floor. There's techniques used for a long time where you're using bags of sand, and you can start off with just kind of holding the sand yourself, and you just start working on punching it, and you'll start to notice this is not as easy as a lot of people think. Work the different angles. If you're looking at more of the iron palm or iron fist type different staking styles, you can see you can just change the style to where you need it, to where you need to bring it up, and slowly but surely work those knuckles up. This is a bucket of sand that is used, where you can do it directly into the sand bucket itself. Nice for people who need knife hand strikes. If you're working the fingers themselves to start to densify the fingers themselves, taking the fingers in this position and driving them into the sand. And in time, again, start off simple, real small, short distances. Tap, if you will. Build up as you can for distance, right? Farther away, increase speed. So in time, you're building that up, and you have to keep records for yourselves. And this is where it starts to become an individual thing. One of the things that I do as we start to get into even the more advanced is what I call tapping steel. Now you can go into wood and just start with tapping the wood. I have tested this myself and talked to a lot of people who are very good at what they do with this stuff, and it's the same thing. If I want to get to steel, the quickest way for me, as long as I'm already built up or close to it, is just start by testing how bad your hand does with that product. Just by tapping it. Nice and easy. Nothing serious. Test yourself. Assess what's going on. Where does it hurt most? Where is it not responding at? Where do you notice that as soon as you tap it, you just don't want to do it anymore because you've hurt something, or it's an area that you could tell is an area that can injure if you go over where you're at. You don't want to break the threshold. You want to build tolerances up to it. You don't want to create injury. You want to create microfractures in controlled elements to then become stronger than what you want to, so that you do your best to stay away from injuries or lower the injury rates as much as possible. And that's what real training is about. Finding every weakness that we have, creating it into a strength, if possible, which this is, and equaling it out to make yourself a more complete, well-rounded athlete. As I've advanced, and we're going to show some of the most advanced where I've taken myself, which is actually full still hitting. Believe it or not, this is a grip Tito, which is excellent for grip work. But one of the things I use it for, which is a little odd, is it's rounded. And I like the rounded because I thought of the mandible jaw, and or if you accidentally hit a knee or an elbow, which happens a lot, where guys will either down block and you're trying to come into the body shots, and if this is barehanded, or even with gloves on. To be honest with you, a lot of guys break their hands while they're in gloves. I mean, if you're hitting very hard and they hit a good block and you catch an elbow wrong, I mean, you can break a hand pretty quick and a foot just as easily. Not to mention, you've seen with shin bones, if you're blocking with another shin tip or even femur, if it's adjusted correctly, you're taking a lot of impact. And I would start just by, as you can hear it, lightly working each knuckle. And I would work the four knuckles. And you could do it with like an iron palm. And on the reverse. So keep in mind, as you get used to that, you can start off with it being loose, so you're allowing some of the vibration to articulate down the other arm, so it's taking some of the impact, even though it is still steel. And then you could bury it into something like sand. And as you can hear, it's not giving as much. So you're building up each level for yourselves to be able to come up to the point of being able to strike steel at different distances with purpose to create those impacts, to create those microfractures, and in time, which it takes time, to build up the availability of bone densities to be equal, or preferably in time to become greater than what we've chosen to impact against. Now, when you look again with that video one, if they would have worked up like a lot of Muay Thai and they're working on kicking into heavier bags, into even tree-type products, bamboo trees, banana trees, they use a lot of the different products like that to where you're seeing them be able to kick through them. Some people, again, with myself, I've kicked up the steel. I've never kicked a concrete post in half. Then again, I've never had a concrete post chase me down before. I guess that'd be new, but I guess we could. as you're learning even here, although I have worked the hands up to concrete and I hit actual cement walls, on which I work against cement walls with them. And again, you work the shin up to that point and you build up those tolerances in the same fashion. Keep in mind, like any training program, this is when it gets more advanced, is you're looking at all those points. So you're taking notes on your notebook for yourselves as what points you need, what has excelled and what has not come up to the standard that you need it at. And that's where you change the programming of what you need to accommodate what works for your body best. Now this is where I get a little more advanced in how I speak, because I don't like giving the answer. I don't believe in it. The only answer I believe in is use the individual and what we find in time, or by knowing it within that perimeter of science that we already know and getting it started there and then starting to refine it to find out what works best for you, is how fast your body responds, how fast each part of the body responds, and then how fast each part responds to what. Is no different than trying to figure out a tricep press on which ones work for how long. And as Louis said it best, everything works for a period of time until it doesn't. And that's where you have to start to look at going, okay, what stopped my progressive manner and what I've done in my program, and why I believe heavily in conjugate is going, well, if I hit sand on some days and I hit soft bags on other days and I hit steel on my max effort days and I rotate those through constantly all over the place, allowing for the proper time of healing and the proper time of energy system training and the proper time of skin development and muscle developments, that's when you build a real program. And that's where it becomes a little more difficult online to say something like that of going, the answer is absolute. In life, there is no absolute answer. There's a generality and then finding out individuality, and that will create the highest level of quality. So it's generality equals or plus individuality equals highest quality of return. There's no other way to do it, because no human being is specifically built exactly the same, or their genetics is exactly the same, or their healing times are exactly the same, or their musculature and force developments are exactly the same. And then I can break that human being down into quadrants, because a lot of times the left hand is different than the right hand if the right hand dominant, and vice versa, and so on and so forth. And that's where I'm saying this is a general way to build yourselves up. As you start to get into intermediates, start to increase the use of a little denser, harder products, just like you would in a regular training program for muscle or anything else for that matter. Even schooling, you start off in kindergarten. When you start getting into that 8th grade, it starts to change. When you start getting into the higher high school levels, it definitely starts to change. When you get into your first years of collegiate, it's different. When we start getting into advanced years, or you start to become more of a mastery type programming, it becomes very different. Same thing with this. The body responds no differently. We just forgot about it, or we don't use it as much anymore. So start off in general, nice and easy, all your normal training styles, all the usual stuff. Start to look more of individual, of what specificities do I really need this for. And if I'm a stand-up striker versus a ground and pound guy, if I need higher levels of elbow strikes versus knuckles, if I'm a shin kicker where I'm just to batter you to death and my shins can't maintain, then you know what areas you need to start looking at to start to refine your game and really start to bring your personal programs to that next level and bring it to the mat later on. So in here is our workhouse. This is our school of learning, of processing, of advancing, to then transfer to specificity. And the specificity should go with what we've created as hammers to then learn how to build the house we want, or how to build the sport type or sport objective we want to become as an athlete. And that's how I see training, Second, is this is not me just in here exercising. I am training with specific purpose for a goal that has been asked of me or for someone else. And as you're seeing, I can hit steel with no problem, as you'll see here in a little bit. I've advanced it quite a bit, because I really want to understand this. I think it's a phenomenal thing. I think the human body is amazing. I think that we've kind of let it go, unfortunately. Our schools have gone total towards academia and not realized that the human body in itself is a complete organism that requires central nervous system development along with muscular development in all realms equally. It's a balance. Everything has that offset balance, just as equal as day is to night. We look at that balance in human of intellectual capability versus musculature or physical capabilities and what it can do. And how I was asked a question that was interesting, and I'll put it out on this because I don't know the answer yet, is how far can the bone system be pushed up to that point? And if you think about it, we go, well, there's a normal level, and we don't know what that level exactly is because everybody's, their view of normal is different. But if you watch the new strongmen out there, I mean, they're lifting cars with no problem. They're able to lift 1,000-pound deadlifts. We have guys that are bench pressing 1,200 and 1,300 pounds now, which is unbelievable amounts of pressure considering what it used to be. And the bones are still holding. So we haven't even tapped the potential yet of fully knowing on how far we can push the skeletal system and or other systems, because again, as I stated in the videos prior, we've limited our belief in ourselves so much, and with purpose from political aspects throughout the world over years of history of not wanting us to remember how good we can become, that we don't know. We don't know our limits and our true absolute limits anymore. And as people are starting to push those limits, we're starting to notice that every time that we hit the level that's never been seen, a year later, a new level that's never been seen before shows up, which tells us there's levels out there that aren't even fathomed yet that we're going to be able to, if we stay on the right path, to accomplish. So when you look at this as simple as a system, a skeletal system is no different than a muscular system of we're going to break down the molecules in a controlled environment, allow them to heal, they will then become harder and more able to sustain what we request of them. No different than the muscle system, to where we tear the microphilia down so that they're all ripped apart, and we actually rip the muscles apart and break down those molecules, sends in the right chemicals and rebuilds. They become larger or stronger depending upon what we did, along with everything else. And we do it to our advantage for a purpose. If that purpose is striking or holding heavier weights, is dependent upon what we choose as individuals. And again, back to the individuality of someone is more important to me than anything. So general is start off your general training like anything else. Your techniquing, if you're already intermediate and you've been going through, say, jiu-jitsu or boxing or any striking type combative, it's already probably there. Then we start to get into the 3/4 and up club, if you want to call it that. And we start looking at, okay, the individuality and requirements. They're starting to get to that advanced level. Now we're down to the 99% out of our way. Over that 1% is where probably you and I are talking right now. And we're starting to look at that 1% of the world, or less, that we're sitting here going, okay, how do I take a guy that can snap a 4x4 in half, and in time make sure he can sustain and snap a 4x6 in half, and in time an 8x8 in half, and in time a tree, anything he wants to walk past, just crack it in half. Basically, it comes at it as his bones become so dense and so able that they can do that. One last thing I want to, as a reminder for individuality, and why I don't like generality so much. You're seeing me do everything I've done in the last year and a half, is I'm 45 years old now. That means I'm not young in training years. In dog years, that means I'm really old. And that's pretty much the same thing in training years. I'm still able to smack steel and throw 1,400 pounds around, even though it may not, for force velocity, it may not be in the most perfect scenarios anymore because I am a lot older and have sustained a lot of damage. But it's doable. And that's what I want to show clearly by actually doing it myself. This isn't someone who is, a lot of people online put out theories or other people's philosophies, and they're pointing fingers to every person that's out there of what they did. This is what I have done and what we as a group of athletes have done over the years on testing these, that has pushed us or allowed us to be around the most world's elite in almost all categories. It's there. It's doable. It's now improvable. So it's improvability, which is a word I love. And the fact that it means it's standing in a provable state, meaning you're going to see me do it. This isn't somebody's talking about it or telling you just, hey, punch a bag and you get stronger because I saw it on TV once. You're seeing the bag hang here, and this is for our people back here. There are some coaches and some athletes and some different people that are using some things, and some that I test because I only work with people that I test. So, you're seeing those things right here. Is, again, I'm 45, mid-40s person moving these kind of weights and hitting these things. But in a general thing, I'm not in a 20-year-old circumstance. I don't heal like a 20-year-old person. I would love to, and I'm sure all of us OGs as they call us now, which means old guys, I think, stands for the fact that I would love to be able to heal or maintain a 20-year-old's vitality. I'm double that plus, and many of us are. In that, though, is the understanding of my waves are going to be longer and different and more individualized depending upon how fast I can maintain my healing processes and recoveries. We all know that in any training aspect. Training is half of it, which is the high part of the wave, which is the tear down. Actually, it's the negative part of the phase if you think about it. And then the positive phase is what we have to make sure of is that we're getting the proper nutrition, sleep, diet needs overall, life needs overall to create the wave of positivity, to create the growth potentials that we can maintain. And you're seeing me do it, so it's doable. I want that clear. I want people to recognize the positive that they have in their lives if they start to look at it, that they can absolutely achieve things that people say are not normal. We don't do normal. In fact, fuck average is our absolute slogan, because everything you see us do is not average. So when you're seeing in the training in the bags, you're seeing in the advancements, you're seeing in the striking potentials, you're seeing in the strength curves, you're seeing in the different types of sports, everything comes down to the fact of the realization of the individual, and it's achievable. And you can do it. And that's exactly how I want you to look at this, going, okay, if this is the goals that I need in my programming, what do I need to look at? Assess yourselves and where you're at, build the programmings up from the ground or at the point you are, and build up from there like any other programming up to the point that you want to achieve. And it's very achievable. I appreciate it. I hope I touched on all the subjects kind of in a very condensed form the best I could to get kind of the answers in there a little bit. And I look forward to seeing kind of what everybody says. We've had some amazing conversations, and I meant this before, and I say it again, of going, I'm along the lines where a lot of people are coming in this division on the combatives and especially in the bone cortical reconstructions or constructions has been excellent. So thank you for everybody that's been involved. I hope these help, especially the coaches that are starting to incorporate the growth of their programming for their advanced guys. And again, take a look at what you guys got to do. If there's any weird questions or odd scenarios you're up against, give me a shout. We'll kind of see what we can kind of do to come up with some answers to give you results. So thank you very much, and take care. Thank you.